Hello and welcome to Cyber Focus. My name is Joel Arnold. Our guest today is Brian Toppin. He is the Program Manager for Strategic Business Services at the Cahill School of Business at the University of the West Indies. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your background, or I guess your role today, is sort of as a career coach or a manager of helping people kind of reach their goals.
Yep.
Career-wise.
Yes.
How would you define leadership? Because that seems to be like the buzzword, of course, out there in the market right now.
Well, to me, leadership is very simple. I take the definition that John Maxwell gives, that leadership is influence. And so that's why you don't need to have a title. I work a lot with supervisors and middle managers who always bemoan that we need, our leader should be the one taking these courses. You need to be talking to them. But that's not the case. If leadership is influence, you can influence your boss, you can influence your peers, and you can influence your customers or those around you to help you achieve what you want, and so therefore become a better leader yourself.
So as someone who's trying to help others become better influencers of their subordinates, of the people above them, how much of that can actually be learned then through the courses you offer, or is it mostly something that someone's personality, something they're born with?
Okay. Well, you'll have certain personality traits that would lend itself to greater ease at which to be a leader. Those who prefer communication, being external, draw energy from talking with others, they probably may have a better time becoming a leader or being a leader because it's a natural inclination for them. But anybody can learn to be a leader. The most reserved person can learn to become assertive, become confident, and so I tell people that the foundation of leadership is communication. Communication. That's the bedrock of leadership. So once you can communicate, however, effectively, you'll be a good leader.
Are there any things other than, you mentioned communication is kind of priority one.
Yes.
What are other priorities that you have your clients focus on?
Well, understanding persons and their preferences. We do a behavioral assessment, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. We use that to help people understand what their preferences are when it comes to energizing themselves, when it comes to, gathering data to make decisions, and then when they make a decision, how do they do that? And the lifestyle, how do they like to organize their life? And so those four main factors from the Myers-Briggs indicator helps them see how best to learn how to communicate with others, because essentially when you're leading other people. So you must invest the time, I tell persons, to understand everybody else and their preferences.
You mentioned how someone organizes their life would affect the way that you help them to become a better leader. Can you give us an example of that?
Well, you'll have in the scales the four scales that Myers-Briggs type indicator use, they have, the last one is lifestyle, and they talk about judgers or perceivers. And so the judger likes to have a very organized lifestyle. They plot their time. Even when they're on a weekend, they wake up and go, okay, I can relax for 2 hours and then I have to go. Whereas the perceiver wakes up and says, hey, what's happening? I can take the world as it comes. So there's not really a necessarily, they go with the flow. They're the persons that go with the flow. It doesn't really matter to them. And so you have to understand, if you're a person who loves structure and you have a subordinate or you have a team member who goes with the flow, you have to tell them, listen, I need you to A, B, and C, and I need the deadline. You have to spell it out clearly for them. Whereas then the perceiver as well has to tell the J not to be so rigid with the plans that they have set. Well, it has to be done at this point in time and this point in time, because sometimes, depending on the situation, you have to go with the flow as well. So those are some examples where, with regards to lifestyle, you have to understand one another clearly.
Sure. You've had a very multinational career. I was looking over your CV earlier today. You spent some time in Canada.
Yep.
You're obviously in the United States right now.
Yep.
You currently live in Barbados, is that right?
Yes.
What different aspects of culture, I guess, and the cultures that you've experienced affect leadership capabilities, or I guess the styles of leadership?
Okay, well, it is true that, in Toronto and then here in the States, it's a lot more fast-paced than you would have in Barbados, although Barbados is catching up. But when a leader from the US or Canada, if they're transplanted into Barbados, has to learn there are certain cultural differences, peculiarities, much like as you move throughout the states even. They're, from New York to LA is very different to Bloomington, vastly different. And so you just have to be aware and sort of take a step back to observe the environment first. And so know that things will get done and do get done in Barbados if you're in Barbados and leading in Barbados, but sometimes it doesn't go as fast as you would want it to or as is expected here in the US or in Canada.
So would you say on the opposite side of sort of the communication factor is kind of the perception factor, the listening factor of
Yes.
a leader that's incredibly important as well?
Yeah, effective listening is one thing that I do stress because that is part of communication. Because I'm a Toastmaster as well, and their slogan is for better listening, for better thinking, then for better speaking. Because Toastmasters people perceive as just public speaking, but you have to listen first, then think about what is being said and communicate effectively. So yeah, I do stress the effective listening as vital in order to be a successful leader.
Now, I would assume you would consider those, as far as in the leadership realm, to be universal. Communication
Yes.
is always a
Yes.
big deal. What other aspects of leadership would you consider to be universal?
Other aspects, it does then vary, I would say, based on then culture, but just understanding people and knowing that it's not necessarily about the widgets that you're creating, but the people who are helping you, that it's a team effort. That is another universal element, is that you'll never be able to do it all alone. You might think so, but you always get help. And so you always have a network. I talk to people about building their network of eagles, because you want to soar. You don't want to be a pigeon picking small bread. You want to find others who will help raise your standards, and that's something you see with leaders. They pick people who will help, call them and tell them, listen, you need to step up your game. And so in order to be successful, you have to network, you have to have a team, and you have to know that people are willing to help you and want to help you, and so be open to receiving the help as well.
When you're designing programs for individuals who come to you and say, I want to be a better communicator, or I want to get better results with my employees, is there any sort of specific thing that comes up time and time again about what they want out of what you provide?
Well, we do have questionnaires as well for communication that we use, and so there's the learning styles to help people understand how best they learn, the VARC learning style, visual, auditory, read and write, and kinesthetic learning styles, and then how do people speak the world that they see. So from those learning styles, oftentimes you can speak visually, so I see what you're saying, would be a visual person. I hear what you're saying as an auditory person, or I feel what you're saying as a kinesthetic person. And so when they come to us, we show them, again, what their preferences are, and that sends off light bulbs. Yes, that does make sense. I do learn best that way. And so we tell them, when you're receiving information from people, this is how you need to tell them to present the information to, so that you're not frustrated. And you need to effectively listen to how other people speak the world as well. So if I'm visual and I keep painting you a picture and you see what I'm saying, but yet you're oral or auditory and you want to hear it, you want it to make sense or sound right. You're having the same conversation, but the rapport you're building, there's a disconnect because you're not speaking the same language. So that's something we stress as well, to pick up on those subtleties that people have with communication.
You mentioned before, when we were speaking before the interview, that, or at least in the documents you provided me about your career and the history that you've had, you mentioned how personal mastery has been, or is at least an important component of what you do. Can you explain that a little bit more about what that is and how that plays into how you coach individuals?
Sure. I believe, my fundamental belief is that everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a purpose on this earth. And that with that purpose, there's greatness within everyone. And so my job, or my purpose, as you would see on my CV, I have a working purpose statement, is that my purpose is to help others find their purpose. What is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you want to make a lifelong difference to, that if you could do this job or this career or this purpose for the rest of your life, what would it be? So mine would be essentially to walk the earth and help people wake up from trying to chase after material things, tap into the intrinsic purpose and the intrinsic greatness that they have, so that they can then acquire whatever else it is, material outside of themselves, to be more successful. So to me, personal mastery is fundamental, and it is something I work on every day, discovering myself, but to help others understand, hey, you're not just here to, fill a role or make up a number. You are here to provide something of value, something of excellence, and you have it within you.
How much of personal mastery comes down to knowing yourself, and how much of it is applying that into some sort of self-discipline?
You have to know yourself. One of the exercises I take persons through is to do a lifeline exercise, and essentially start looking at significant dates as they were growing up to start to see patterns. So when I do the exercise, or I show my example, I tell people I moved 22 times in my life in different houses, apartments, and countries. I lived in 3 countries, Canada, the US, and Barbados. And so one of the things that came up for me was I can adapt easily to change. Well, it makes sense when you look at your lifeline. So you have to understand yourself. And then you're right, to be disciplined, to say, well, these are the patterns that are showing up, the things that I love to do or am passionate about. So how can I make that my life's work? Not a job, not even a career, but your life's work, so that you're never bored of doing it. You always want to be in it for however long. I stopped thinking about retirement a long time ago, because this is something I want to do until I can't do it anymore. So it is to stick to the vision or the purpose, but you have to understand yourself and know what it is first. So yeah, it is a balance that you need.
When you work with for-profit businesses versus non-profit businesses, what sort of differences do leaders in those separate organizations come to you for?
Well, with the for-profit, it's how to maximize revenue and the persons, how to get the best out of their people, and then how to save costs. I would say would be the major factors for when the for-profits are coming to you. Non-profits are how to be sustainable. So they're looking at saving costs, but how do they also get grants? How do they do a better job of bringing in, not necessarily revenue, but how do they ask for donations? How do they do that more effectively? So it is a different makeup, because they are not for profit, so they don't want to be seen to be doing it and giving a profit, but yet they don't want to starve either. So there are definitely fundamental differences for each of them. And then the staff mentality as well is different. So the not-for-profits, again, are trying to, in most cases in Barbados, they're scurrying to see who they can get donations from, or if they can do a bake sale, which is a completely different mindset to then going out and getting a sale and getting more market share and bringing in and trying to, beat your competitors. So yeah, there is a difference for sure.
You've been doing this for quite a while, at least being a career coach.
Yeah.
How has the field changed in the time that you've been doing it? It's been a decade or so right now, hasn't it?
Yeah. It is different because, well, in Barbados, the older generation are now saying, well, if I do have a purpose, what is it? So they're becoming more inclined to think about it rather than spend 20 years at a company, or even moving from 2 or 3 companies within their lifetime, and saying, well, maybe I can do something and make a difference as well. Whereas the younger generation have grown up knowing that they can make a difference, that they can go all around the world and make a difference. I'll give you one example of that. I donate time to the Optimist Club. The Optimists are all about kids, and so they have an oratorical contest every year. And there was this young girl, for Hannah, I'll never forget her. We had finished our coaching session for making presentations, and it was a group of them. Everybody had left, and I was waiting with her to make sure that her mother came. She was 14 at the time. And so I said to her, when you get older, because I didn't want to say, when you grow up, because immediately she would shut down. When you get older, what is it that you want to do? And she said, well, I have been researching teaching in Kenya, English to rural communities and rural villages. And so I think when I graduate from university, I'll spend a year giving back. And I thought to myself, giving back? how can you even think
Pretty
about
incredible
yeah
for a young child.
yeah because when I was 14 all I wanted to do was surf or play volleyball. Those were the only things. I wasn't thinking about children in Africa, I wasn't thinking about Kenya.
Yeah.
But that's the mindset they already have. How can I make a difference? And so when people are coming, when they're younger and they're coming to me, they already have some idea, and you're just trying to draw it out, harness it, design a path for them, and then unleash them. Whereas those who I would say probably in their 40s and up, I don't know what I'm good at. And so you have to go through, we like to do assessments again so that they can see in black and white what they prefer, some of their strengths. You go through some mind mapping with them to understand, their networks and their goals and their visions, because they've been thinking about it, but they've never written it down. And so that would be the biggest difference. The generation coming up, and now the older generation saying, well, I don't have to stick to a job anymore for the 30 years or 40 years.
The final question I have for you is particularly helpful for someone in my position who is still a student at the moment. You mentioned younger folks. I might not be in that group yet, but
Right.
What kind of things would you tell someone in my position to focus on, a year or two away from going back out into the real world here?
Okay. Again, I would ask you to sit down and talk about what you love to do, and find some words that you can say when you think of what do I love to do? What do I really enjoy? When you think about Richard Branson from Virgin, he said, he loved to help people. He loved to have fantastic experiences in whatever he did. So he became a serial entrepreneur because every time he was dissatisfied with the company, he said, well, I don't want to go to you anymore. In the case of British Airways, the way you run your airline is not very good. I'm going to create my own. So he was passionate about that. Steve Jobs is similar. How can I integrate technology into the world? That's what he loves to do. He wants to make a difference. So that's what I would ask you. What do you love to do? And how then could you make, again, a career of it or a purpose of it? And so it's easy when you're graduating because you have bills, you have loans, you have student loans. You're like, I need to get a job and I need to start making some money. And that's fine. But as Jim Rohn has said, Jim Rohn's one of the great business development gurus from the 70s. He was saying you could work on your wages and still work on your profit, being your company that you really want to do at the same time. And so that would be my suggestion. If you need to start bringing in money, by all means, don't starve yourself, but get a job and then focus after you finish your job on what your purpose is and how you could make that your reality every day, because people are doing it every day now. And so that's what I would tell you to do.
All right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Cyber Focus. If you guys have comments or would like to propose a new topic for the next session, please contact us at cyber@indiana.edu. Until then, signing off. See you then.